Hi guys, I'm CMYK and welcome to day 1 of 100 days of making comic. Today I worked about 4 hours on the dialogue for the comic that I'll be calling Wishes of 7 Witches. Adding to that, I also tried figuring out what kind of format I want to use for printing my comic later. Now it seems to be unimportant right now to think about in what kind of format I want to print my comic, but actually it's quite important for the beginning to know in what kind of format you want to draw, so you don't bump into any problems later when you want to print it. It depends how you want to publish your comic. Either you upload it as a webcomic where you can scroll up and down, or you want your end product to be a comic book. Of course, I'm making it myself a bit more difficult by doing both at the same time, so that means more work for me. The reason why I'm doing both is because I do want to have my comic in my own hand physically and not only on Webtoons. And even if I was unsure if I want to make a comic book or not, it's easier to format a traditional book into a webcomic than a webcomic into a book. More specific, it is more pricier to make a webcomic into a comic book than a comic book into a webcomic. I go more into detail in another video, but for now let's just talk about the formatting, the sizes, and everything that's important at the beginning for making a printable book. Now there are different kind of sizes that you can print as a comic book. To figure out the measurements, you either Google it, check out the sites at the print-on-demand sites that you choose, or you just measure the manga that is in your shelf, like I did. Now the books that are in my shelf and that you can buy in the store often have the measurement of 13 times 18 centimeters. That's the size that I chose because I feel most comfortable with that size of a manga, so just check out what kind of size you want. Now, when you open a new project on Photoshop, there are a few changes that you need to take on the settings. To make sure that you print a good quality of a manga page, put it in the measurements 13 times 18 centimeters, and where you see the DPI, you have to make the decision. DPI stands for dot per inch, and this setting is only important if you want to print something. To print a colored comic, you have to have at least 300 DPI. I personally make 350 out of it, and if you want to make a black and white or inking comic, it's better to set it even on 600 DPI to make the lines very crisp. If you already know where you want to print your comic, check out on their website or call them to ask how high the resolution should be. The next thing that you have to change is change the RGB into CMYK. RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and CMYK stands for CM, magenta, yellow, and black. It's important to change it to CMYK because the printers only use CMYK and the RGB is for the digital colors and they are more vibrant than the CMYK. Now you can press enter. I did another setting where I prepared the bleed lines. If you would print your comic without a bleed line, your comic pages would always have a white rim. To make sure that your comic pages goes to the end of the edge of the paper, you have to create a bleed line where you can see while drawing where your picture may be trimmed. For that I went to image and then canvas size and set the sizes and made each side 7 millimeters longer and 5 millimeters wider. Now I made the mistake in the video that I only added 7 millimeters and 5 millimeters once to each side, but you have to do it twice. So yeah, do the math and then it'll be fine. Press on enter and then you're finished preparing your page. For me, it's also important to figure out what kind of panels I want to use, because the size and the shape of a panel can say a lot. You can make simple panels, many complex panels in one page, paneling for traditional comic or a webcomic. Think about if the comic page should be in a rim or open space. Think about what specific panels mean to you or your readers. For example, square panels are used for all kinds of things. Long horizontal panels for action and reaction. Long vertical panels for time-lapse effects or long webtoon strips. These are only a few examples that I feel like when I see these kind of panels or want to use them in my comic. So just experiment and think about what these panels mean to you and make your own rules. It's also good to write down your layout rules to remind yourself and create your own style through your panels. I'll be making a separate video giving you tips how to convert a comic into a webcomic easier in another video. So all in all, what's important? Figure out the size that you want to have your comic book being printed. Make yourself a template. Play around and figure out what kind of comic page and panels you want to use in your comic. And I promise you, you will feel so great and so pumped to work on your comic, because now you can imagine your comic being printed out and being in your hands after you finished creating your book. I hope this video helped you. This is the knowledge that I have collected creating a comic for printing, but I'm a newbie when it comes to printing out a comic. So if you already have done it, or you know something else about it, or I made any mistake, then write it down in the comments down below so I can improve on my mistakes and it can maybe also help other people. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you did, it would be nice if you give it a like and even subscribe if you want to follow me and work together with me on your own 100 days of making a comic or working on your Webtoons Contest comic. And yeah, see you tomorrow then. Bye!